Sometimes the most profound acts of love happen in the darkest moments of desperation. In 1887, on the windswept plains of Nebraska, a story unfolded that would challenge everything we think we know about family, sacrifice, and the true meaning of home. When Sarah Mitchell, a young widow with a dying infant, stumbled onto Thomas Brennan's ranch during a brutal winter storm, neither could have imagined how their lives would intertwine. What began as a simple plea for shelter would become a testament to the extraordinary lengths a mother will go to save her child, and the unexpected compassion that can bloom in the most unlikely hearts. This is the story of a woman who was willing to give up everything, including herself, and the man who chose to catch what she was prepared to let fall. The blizzard of February 1887 was merciless, turning the Nebraska landscape into a white wasteland where survival measured itself in heartbeats. Sarah Mitchell clutched her 6-month-old son closer to her chest, feeling his labored breathing against her ribs as she stumbled through knee-deep snow. Her husband had died 3 months earlier from consumption, leaving her with nothing but debts and a baby who grew weaker each day. The fever that had taken hold of little James 2 weeks ago showed no signs of breaking, and Sarah knew, with a mother's terrible intuition, that time was running out. She had sold everything, their small homestead, her wedding ring, even her winter coat, to pay for medicine that hadn't worked. Now, with her last dollar spent and nowhere left to turn, she had made the desperate decision to seek help from the only ranch within 50 miles. The wind howled around her like a living thing, trying to tear the baby from her arms as she pressed forward through the storm. Thomas Brennan was checking on his cattle when he first spotted the figure struggling through the snow near his property line. At 35, he had built his ranch from nothing, working 18-hour days to carve out a life from the unforgiving prairie. He had never married, telling himself that the land was wife enough. But lately, the silence of his house had begun to feel more like loneliness than peace. Through the swirling snow, he could make out what appeared to be a woman carrying something, stumbling and falling every few steps. His first instinct was to assume it was another drifter looking for handouts, but something about the way she moved, with desperate purpose rather than aimless wandering, made him spur his horse forward. As he drew closer, he could see she was young, probably no more than 25, with dark hair plastered to her head by melting snow. What stopped his breath entirely was the bundle in her arms, a baby, barely moving, its tiny face blue with cold. "Ma'am!" Thomas called out, dismounting before his horse had fully stopped. Sarah looked up at him with eyes that held the wild desperation of a cornered animal, and for a moment he thought she might run. Instead, she collapsed to her knees in the snow, clutching the baby so tightly he feared she might hurt the child. "Please," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the wind. "My baby is dying." Thomas didn't hesitate. He scooped both mother and child into his arms and carried them toward his house, feeling how light she was, how the baby's breathing came in shallow, irregular gasps. The warmth of his kitchen hit them like a wall as he pushed through the door, and Sarah began to sob, not from relief, but from the terrible knowledge that warmth alone might not be enough. Thomas laid them both on the sofa near the fire, studying the baby's flushed face and recognizing the signs of pneumonia that had claimed too many children on the frontier. The next several hours blurred together in a haze of desperate activity as Thomas did everything he could to help. He heated water, found clean blankets, and even rode through the storm to fetch Doc Morrison from town, though the old physician took one look at the baby and shook his head grimly. "The fever's too high," Morrison said quietly, pulling Thomas aside while Sarah rocked her son by the fire. "Even if we can break it, the damage to his lungs, I've seen this before. You need to prepare her." Thomas felt something twist in his chest as he watched Sarah singing softly to the baby, her voice cracking with exhaustion and fear. She had told him her story in fragments, the husband who died, the debts, the long journey through the storm, and he understood that this child was literally all she had left in the world. The thought of having to tell her that her son was beyond saving felt like being asked to extinguish the last star in a dark sky. For 3 days, Sarah never left the baby's side, existing on nothing but coffee and the fierce determination that love alone could somehow pull her son back from the edge of death. Thomas watched her with a mixture of admiration and heartbreak, seeing how she refused to acknowledge the reality that everyone else could see. She would hold James against her chest for hours, as if her own heartbeat could somehow regulate his, whispering stories about the father he would never remember and the life they would build together when he got better. Thomas found himself making excuses to stay in the kitchen, drawn by something he couldn't name, to witness this raw display of maternal devotion. He had seen plenty of suffering on the frontier, but there was something about Sarah's refusal to surrender that stirred something deep in his chest. On the second night, he woke to find her collapsed in the chair beside the makeshift crib he had built, still clutching the baby's tiny hand even in sleep. The fever broke on the third morning, but instead of relief, Doc Morrison's expression grew even more grave. "The pneumonia has damaged his lungs severely," he explained to Thomas, while Sarah slept fitfully nearby. "Even if he survives the next few days, he'll never be strong. He'll need constant care, medicine we can't get out here, and even then—" He didn't finish the sentence, but Thomas understood. The baby might live, but it would be a fragile, difficult existence that would require resources Sarah simply didn't have. Thomas found himself studying the young woman's face as she slept, noting the dark circles under her eyes, the way her clothes hung loose on her thin frame. She had been slowly starving herself to keep the baby fed, he realized, and the thought made his hands clench into fists. He had always prided himself on being practical, on making decisions based on logic rather than emotion. But something about this situation was testing every principle he had ever held. When Sarah woke that afternoon, she seemed to sense immediately that something had changed. The baby's breathing was easier, but there was a quality to the silence in the room that spoke of difficult conversations held while she slept. "He's going to be all right, isn't he?" she asked, but her voice carried the weight of someone who already knew the answer. Thomas sat down across from her, choosing his words carefully as he explained what Doc Morrison had said. He watched her face crumble and rebuild itself several times as she processed the information, her hands never stopping their gentle stroking of the baby's hair. "How much?" she asked finally. "How much would it cost to get him the care he needs?" Thomas named a figure that might as well have been $1 million to someone in her position, and he saw the exact moment when the last of her hope died. That evening, as Thomas worked in his barn, he could hear Sarah singing through the open kitchen window, lullabies that sounded more like funeral dirges. He had offered to let her stay as long as she needed, but they both knew it was only delaying the inevitable. She had no money, no family, and no way to provide the kind of care her son would require. The frontier was unforgiving to the weak, and a sickly child with a destitute mother had little chance of survival. Thomas found himself thinking about his own childhood, about the mother who had died when he was 12, and the father who had worked himself to death trying to provide for his children. He understood the terrible mathematics of frontier life, where love was often not enough and hard choices had to be made for survival, but understanding didn't make it any easier to watch Sarah's world collapse around her. The conversation that would change everything began at dawn on the 4th day, when Sarah appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding her son with a resolve that Thomas had never seen before. She had spent the night thinking, she told him, and she had come to a decision that would ensure her baby's survival. "I want you to take him," she said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "You have the means to care for him, to get him the medicine he needs. I can't give him what he deserves, but you can." Thomas stared at her in shock, understanding immediately what she was asking and why it was tearing her apart. She was offering to give up the only thing she had left in the world because she loved him too much to watch him suffer. The sacrifice was so profound, so completely selfless, that Thomas felt something fundamental shift inside his chest. "Sarah, you can't be serious," Thomas said. But even as the words left his mouth, he could see that she had never been more serious about anything in her life. She explained her reasoning with the cold logic of desperation. She had nothing to offer the baby except love, and love wouldn't cure his damaged lungs or pay for the medicines he would need. Thomas had a successful ranch, money in the bank, and the respect of the community. He could give James opportunities that she never could. "I'm not asking you to adopt him," she clarified, her voice breaking slightly. "I'm asking you to save him. I'm asking you to be the father he needs, because I can't be the mother he deserves." The words hung in the air between them like a challenge to everything Thomas thought he knew about family, duty, and love. Thomas found himself pacing the kitchen as Sarah laid out her plan with heartbreaking precision. She would leave that morning, she said, and never contact them again. It would be easier for everyone if the baby forgot she had ever existed. She had even thought of a story Thomas could tell when James was older, that his parents had died and Thomas had taken him in out of kindness. "He'll never have to know that his mother was too poor to save him," she whispered, pressing her face against the baby's head. "He'll grow up thinking he was wanted, not abandoned." Thomas watched her memorizing every detail of her son's face, and he realized that she was preparing to carry this secret to her grave. The magnitude of her sacrifice, not just giving up her child, but erasing herself from his story entirely, left Thomas speechless. But as Thomas listened to Sarah's plan, he found himself thinking about something she hadn't considered. "What about you?" he asked quietly. "Where will you go? What will you do?" For the first time since she had begun speaking, Sarah's composure cracked completely. She admitted that she hadn't thought that far ahead, that all her energy had been focused on securing James's future. She had no family, no skills beyond keeping house and caring for a baby, and no money to start over somewhere else. The truth was that she was preparing to sacrifice not just her son, but her own future, condemning herself to a life of poverty and loneliness so that James could have a chance at something better. As Thomas realized the full scope of what she was offering to give up, he felt something click into place in his mind, a solution so simple and yet so radical that it took his breath away. "Take my baby too," Sarah whispered, extending James toward Thomas with trembling hands, her voice breaking on every word. But as Thomas reached for the child, he found himself saying something that surprised them both. "What if I took you both?" The words hung in the air like a prayer, and Sarah stared at him as if he had spoken in a foreign language. Thomas felt his heart racing as he continued, the idea gaining strength even as he spoke it aloud. "Marry me, Sarah. Not for love, not yet, but for James. Give him a mother and a father. Give yourself a home and give me—" He paused, searching for words to describe the loneliness he had only just begun to acknowledge. "Give me a family." Sarah's eyes widened in shock, and for a moment Thomas thought she might faint. "You don't understand," Sarah protested, stepping back as if his offer was somehow dangerous. "I have nothing to bring to a marriage, no dowry, no family connections, no skills that would make me a proper wife for a man like you." But Thomas shook his head, moving closer and gently taking James from her arms. "You're wrong," he said softly, looking down at the baby who was already beginning to look healthier in the warmth of the house. "You have everything I need. You have love enough to sacrifice yourself for this child, strength enough to walk through a blizzard to save him, and courage enough to give him up if that's what it takes. Those aren't small things, Sarah. Those are the things that matter." He looked up at her then, and she saw something in his eyes that she had never expected to see again. Hope. Thomas continued speaking, his voice growing stronger as he outlined his vision for their future. "I've been alone on this ranch for 15 years, telling myself that solitude was strength, But watching you with James these past few days, I've realized what I've been missing. This house needs laughter, needs the sound of a child playing, needs someone who understands that love is worth fighting for." He gestured around the kitchen, which already looked more like a home than it had in years, simply because Sarah and James were in it. "I'm not asking you to love me, not right away. I'm asking you to let me earn that love, to let me prove that I can be the husband you deserve and the father James needs. I'm asking you to let me catch you both when you're falling." Sarah felt tears streaming down her face as she realized that he was offering her something she had never dared to dream of, a second chance. "I will," Thomas whispered, and in those two words Sarah heard a promise that encompassed everything. He would care for James. He would provide for them both. He would protect them from the harsh realities of frontier life, and he would love them both as if they had always been his. Sarah looked into his eyes and saw not pity or obligation, but genuine affection and the kind of steady strength that she had been searching for her entire life. When she nodded her acceptance, Thomas felt something settle in his chest that he had never experienced before. The profound satisfaction of knowing that he was exactly where he was supposed to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. As he held both Sarah and James in his arms, he understood that sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as desperate pleas for help, and that love doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it whispers, "I will," in a kitchen warmed by firelight and hope. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in Thomas's parlour, with Doc Morrison serving as witness and James sleeping peacefully in Sarah's arms throughout the simple ceremony. There were no white dresses or elaborate celebrations, just two people choosing to build something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. Sarah had spent those weeks learning the rhythms of the ranch, discovering that she had a natural talent for managing the household accounts and a gift for making the austere house feel like a home. Thomas, meanwhile, had thrown himself into preparing for fatherhood with the same determination he had once applied to building his ranch. He read every book on child-rearing he could find, consulted with Doc Morrison about James's ongoing care, and even built a proper nursery in the room next to their bedroom. The baby's health improved steadily under their combined care, and while he would always be more delicate than other children, it became clear that love and proper medical attention were working miracles. What surprised them both was how naturally they fell into the rhythms of married life, despite the unconventional beginning of their relationship. Sarah discovered that Thomas was not the stern, solitary man she had first imagined, but someone who possessed a dry sense of humor and an unexpected gentleness with James. Thomas, in turn, found himself enchanted by Sarah's quiet strength and the way she could find joy in small things. The first time James smiled, the sight of wildflowers blooming near the house, the satisfaction of a well-cooked meal shared in comfortable silence. They were careful with each other at first, polite and considerate, but gradually their conversations grew longer and more personal. Sarah began sharing stories about her first husband and the dreams they had shared, while Thomas opened up about his childhood and the loneliness that had driven him to seek solitude on the frontier. The transformation of their relationship from arrangement to affection happened so gradually that neither could pinpoint exactly when it occurred. Perhaps it was the night James had a fever and they took turns walking the floor with him, working together with the seamless coordination of a team that had been together for years. Or maybe it was the morning Sarah woke to find Thomas teaching the baby to grasp his finger, speaking to him in the gentle voice he had never used with anyone else. It might have been the evening when Sarah laughed at one of Thomas's stories, and he realized that the sound had become his favorite music, or the day when she reached for his hand without thinking, and he understood that she no longer saw him as a stranger who had rescued her, but as her partner in building this new life. By the time their first anniversary arrived, what had begun as a marriage of convenience had blossomed into something neither had expected, a love story written in daily kindnesses, shared responsibilities, and the gradual building of trust. James, now a healthy and happy toddler, called Thomas Papa with the absolute confidence of a child who had never known anything but love and security. Sarah had discovered that she possessed a talent for ranch management that complemented Thomas's skills perfectly, and together they had expanded the operation beyond anything Thomas had achieved alone. More importantly, they had created something that neither had possessed before, a family built not on passion or romance, but on the deeper foundation of mutual respect, shared purpose, and the kind of love that grows stronger with each passing day. When Thomas held his wife and son in his arms on that anniversary evening, he understood that sometimes the most profound love stories begin not with "I love you," but with "I will," and that the promise to catch someone when they're falling can become the foundation for a lifetime of happiness. This remarkable true story reminds us that the most powerful acts of love often happen in our darkest moments, and that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as our deepest challenges. Sarah's willingness to sacrifice everything for her child, and Thomas's decision to open his heart to unexpected love, created a family that would thrive for generations on the Nebraska plains. If this incredible tale of sacrifice, love, and second chances touched your heart, please subscribe for more amazing stories of human resilience and hit that notification bell. Share in the comments below. Have you ever experienced or witnessed an act of unexpected kindness that changed someone's life forever?